tell you a little story. This is about a client I had a few years ago who came to me because, well, he was recommended actually by his HR director at the time to come for some coaching because he had got himself into what I think of as a career cul-de-sac. He was the finance director for purchasing in his organisation. It's a big organisation, lots of different constituent companies and so on. And so he'd been looking after the finance for purchasing for quite a long period of time. He'd got it all worked out. It was all working beautifully. But basically, he was the only person who really understood how it worked. And he'd got to that point, as many of us do with a job, where once it's all working and you know that it's just like clockwork, then you kind of lose interest a bit and you start thinking, right, what can I do next? And so this particular man had applied for several other jobs within the group of companies and he'd not been successful. And so the feedback had not been really damaging, but the feedback had been quite pointed about certain aspects of the way that he conducted himself and how he came over an interview and so on. And so his HR director recommended that he had some coaching. So we sat down and talked about where he was and where he wanted to be. And what we identified was a number of key issues. One was that the feedback had been that he didn't present himself in meetings as someone who was in a position of leadership and authority, that he tended to fade into the background a little bit. And so in order to get what would effectively be the next step up on the career ladder, it was felt that he needed to present a more powerful and engaging presence when he was in meetings. The other thing that came out of our initial discussions was that there wasn't really anybody who could take over from him. That while he had a good team, he didn't really have anybody ready to succeed into his role if he moved on. And that was another reason why perhaps the organisation as a whole was keen to keep him where he was. So that was one very obvious avenue of endeavour for him, was to get a successor up to speed and make it very clear that there was someone who could take over from him when he moved on. But that first piece, the thing about sort of not coming over very well in meetings, not very specific, but then you get an idea of what that means. So with my NLP hat on, I encouraged him to talk a little bit about things that happened in early life, what had formed his view of how to be a good employee, what had formed his view about what was important in the world of work and so on. And one of the things that he kind of said almost as a throwaway comment was that when he went into a meeting, he was aiming to get out of it without making a fool of himself. And I said, well, why would you think that? And he said, I don't know. He said, but when I was a kid, my dad used to say to me, if you haven't got anything sensible to say, don't open your mouth and prove it. Now, witty little comment. But, if you're at an impressionable age, and all of us are at some point in life, to have that said to you regularly is going to have an impact. And this particular man, when he told me that, he then kind of sat back and frowned a bit and went, yes, maybe I'm still doing that. Maybe as I go into board meetings or meetings with suppliers or whatever, he said, still there's a part of me that is a 10-year-old who's anxious not to make an idiot of myself. And so with that bit of insight and that understanding, then we were able to overlay that old pattern with something new and to stop him going into meetings feeling like the prime objective of the meeting was to get out without making an idiot of himself, and to go in with an objective that actually had a business purpose and that would make a difference to how other people reacted to him, what people thought of him, and ultimately the degree of influence that he had in the organisation. Now, there was a lot more that went on in that. That was kind of one of the key turning points in the coaching programme. And I kept in touch with this client for a little while, and he did get the promotion that he was looking for, which was great. And then a few years later, he got in touch with me again, and he told me that the company that he'd worked for had been taken over by another larger organisation, and that almost everybody at his level in the organisation had been made redundant at that point. But he had been kept on as finance director. And he saw that as a really great testament to the skills that he'd developed when we'd done the coaching programme together some years earlier. And I said to him, so, what can I do for you now? And he said, that was great. I enjoyed being finance director of the company. He said, but now we've had another change of circumstances. The world has turned again. He said, and now I've been promoted to MD, and I'm not quite sure I know how to do that job. So we started the process again. Now, that's not the point of the story. The point really is that sometimes it can be something quite small that's become an intrinsic part of the way that we think, that gets in the way of a whole career. And by moving it out of the way, suddenly it unblocks and frees up everything so that the person is able to go forward unencumbered and achieve what it was that they wanted to achieve. I just thought you'd like that story.